Call meeting order. Those who care to, please stand for an opening prayer and pledge of allegiance. Mr. Cameron, if you would.
Let's pray. Lord and Father, we just thank you for this day and thank you for all you do for us. And Lord, I just pray tonight that you'll just guide and direct us in all that we do and all that we say. Lord, just pray for our nation and all that's going on around it. Lord, just be with us and guide us in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. We will start off with citizen participation. We're going to move those two items around before we move on to appointments. So anyone who would like to speak to anything not on the agenda, please step to the podium, state your name and address, and you'll have 5 minutes. Anyone who would like to speak to anything not on the agenda? Seeing none, citizen participation is closed. Moving on to appointments. At this time, we're going to have ask for appointments for the Board of Adjustments, Housing Authority, and Planning and Zoning. Starting with the Board of Adjustments, I would ask for a motion and a second to appoint Tori Conklin for a term of 5 years to the Board of Adjustments.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Staying with Board of Adjustments, I would ask for a motion and a second to appoint Andy Simmons for a term of 5 years to the Board of Adjustments.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries 8-0. Now moving on to the Housing Authority. I ask for a motion and a second to appoint Judy Ankrum for a term of 4 years.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Staying with the Housing Authority, I would ask for a motion and a second to appoint Kevin Corner for a term of 4 years.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. 2 more for Housing Authority, sorry. Ask for a motion and a second to appoint Dorothy Craig for a term of 4 years.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Now, staying with Housing Authority, I would ask if there's a motion and a second to appoint Sue Watkins for a term of 4 years.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries 8-0. Moving on to Planning and Zoning. I would ask if there's a motion and a second to appoint Brandon Andrews for a term of 4 years.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. I'd ask if there's a motion and a second to appoint Ransom Ellis to a 4-year term for Planning and Zoning.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion in 2 seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. 2 more. I would ask if there's a motion and a second to appoint Kevin Hahn for a 4-year term, Planning and Zoning.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries 8-0. And the last one, I would ask if there's a motion and a second to appoint Eric Peterson for a term of 4 years to Planning and Zoning.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries 8-0. Thank you all. I know that's tedious, but since that wasn't put out to the public in advance, I wanted to make sure we said every name so that anyone who's watching at home or sitting in the audience could hear those names and who we were appointing. Also for Planning and Zoning, we had some great applicants and interviews that were done for that, and we want to thank those people who served on Planning and Zoning in the past. The city continues to move along, and it's great to have fresh eyes, and as we all know from the seats that we're in, to have those people that look at those issues and give us their recommendation for those planning and zoning matters. Was there something? Okay. Actually, we have one of them, Mr. Hahn. He's here today. He's one of those people we just appointed for planning and zoning. So thank you for willingness to serve. Moving on, I would ask if there's a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0 with one abstention, Mr. Jones. Boards, Commission, and Committee schedule of note city council meeting. We're asking to move the city council meeting from June 3rd to June 26th, which is 1 week from today. July 3rd, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. From July 3rd to June 26th. And the reason for that is because anybody who's an applicant for anything, we don't want to try to press them into getting in right before the deadline of July 4th and make it easier on anyone who might be traveling. Do we have anybody who has an issue with moving that meeting from July 3rd to next Tuesday?
I may not be able to attend this.
Okay. Okay, seeing nothing else, as of right now, we will plan to have that meeting June 26th, the next council meeting. Next planning and zoning meeting is July 9th, 2018, to be held here at City Hall. Moving on to old business. I need a motion and a second for the second reading of bill number 18-28.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 8-0, Ms. Brenda.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, authorizing a cost-share agreement with 156 Corner LLC for the extension of public water main.
Okay, we had a presentation by Ms. Mayfield at the last meeting at the first read. Do you have any questions, comments, or concerns for Ms. Mayfield before we move into final passage? Seeing none, I ask if there's a motion and a second for final passage of bill number 18-28.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Councilmember Franklin?
Aye.
Councilmember Duran?
Aye.
Councilmember Russell?
Aye.
Councilmember Dykeman?
Aye.
Councilmember Brashears?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Self?
Aye.
Motion carries 8-0. Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. On to new business. I need a motion and a second for the first reading of bill number 18-29.
Motion.
Second.
Do I have a second? Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0, Ms. Brenda.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, amending Title I of the Republic Municipal Code by repealing Article 1, Capital Improvements Committee of Section 125, Boards, Commissions, and Committees.
Thank you. Mr. Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What this is a request is obviously repealing a board. It's at Section 125. It's Capital Improvement Committee. It was established, from what I can tell, many years ago, and provides another level of review for the capital expenditures of the city. And provided the changes that we've made in that process, it's a group that meets once a month. It has not been meeting routinely once a month, and from what I can tell, the last recommendation that was provided to this council was regarding the City Hall property. I believe that they were involved in that discussion, but I can't find any other piece of where that contributes to what we provide in the budget. I know the staff gets together each year and makes a presentation to that committee. And so moving forward, we would like to remove and repeal that committee because it's kind of viewed as a level of redundancy. Staff has to prepare for those meetings way in advance, and I believe that we're having those, it's like we're doing them twice, and really this is the board that makes, this is the council that makes that decision. And so it would definitely make the budget process much more easier by not having to go through that process, and quite frankly, I don't want to take community members' time for something that we're not fully utilizing, and so there's other places that they could serve. I appreciate the service they provide, but I think it completely aligns differently for the direction we're going. And because it was established by ordinance is why we're having to come to this level to appeal it. So any future committees or boards we would probably establish may not be by ordinance, but maybe just by resolution that you're aware that what we're doing, instead of having something that's required to be reporting on a monthly or annual basis. And so that is the reason for the request, and I appreciate your consideration.
Any discussion or questions from council?
How many people are on the board right now?
So what you have is you have council members Wilson and council member Dykeman. You have 3 community residents, and then you have the finance director and myself as an ad hoc position in the committee.
How often do you meet now?
Well, it was supposed to be once a month, but it's probably, I could safely say in my almost 2 years, I've been to 3. Because, and the reason is no disrespect to that, the agenda's there, but the discussion is about capital. And if you saw the budget we were talking about when we first, and as you go through the budget process, we had approximately $200,000 to work through. It's kind of hard to ask someone to look at what that is, and we're ultimately deciding where we're going to spend the money. But I would defer to Mr. Wilson or Mr. Dykeman if they have any insight as to the committee itself.
Other than, I mean, I sat on it and chaired it this past year, and it was, like you said, to me it seemed like it was a redundancy of, the same thing, and we only had a certain amount of dollars to spend anyway, so no matter what we decided, it may or may not happen. So it was kind of to me, a waste of public time.
Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, remember this is a first read. If you have any questions, please get with Mr. Keeling. And Mr. Cameron, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, moving on. I need a motion and a second for the first reading of bill number 18-30.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Miss Brenda.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, approving amending the zoning code and official map by changing the classification of approximately 61.6 acres from agricultural AG to general commercial C2, owned by Mount Farms, a Missouri general partnership, and located at 3456 South Farm Road 101.
Thank you, Mr. Tyson.
Yeah, the site subject to this rezone application is approximately 60 acres in size and is located at the northwest corner of the intersection of U.S. Highway 60 and Farm Road 103 in the City of Republic. The rezone to the general commercial C2 zoning district would permit the land to be used for any purpose that is, or any land use that is expressly permitted within that zoning district. A copy of that zoning district's permitted use list is provided to you with your packet so that you can review that. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. The subject property already enjoys immediate access to the city's water and sanitary sewer systems. Both of those systems are of sufficient capacity to serve 60 acres of general commercial development at this particular location. The subject property is presently served from transportation by U.S. Highway 60, which is classified by the city and its regional partners as an expressway class thoroughfare. It is also presently served by Farm Road 101 and 103. The city staff does not consider the current transportation infrastructure serving this site to be sufficient, and I'll speak to that a little bit more later here in the presentation. The city's adopted land use plan indicates that a mixture of commercial and industrial uses in a planned business park fashion is appropriate for this general location within the city with regard to future land use. Staff considers the general commercial C2 zoning district to be compatible with what the land use plan is trying to describe there with regard to a planned business park. The city's major thoroughfare plan designates South Farm Road 103 as a future collector thoroughfare that is to be realigned according to the transportation plan to have a 90-degree angle intersection with U.S. Highway 60 as opposed to the very acute angle intersection that it has now. So it would be realigned, and then the future realigned Farm Road 103 would provide access to a secondary circulation system via a frontage road that would parallel U.S. Highway 60. The idea in implementing that then is to get the traffic that is going to that development out of the through lanes, so that traffic that is using the expressway to get back and forth from the job centers in Springfield to their residences here in town or vice versa can continue to utilize that expressway in an efficient manner. So we get that traffic off of the highway and onto that secondary circulation system as efficiently as we can. The P&Z Commission unanimously recommended approval of this application. Staff is also recommending approval of this application. So I want to just revisit briefly my remarks about the transportation system as it is, in case it seems odd that I would say that this has a bunch of frontage on a U.S. highway that carries 30,000 cars a day. How could it not be adequately served when there's a highway right next to it? And the situation is, because that is classified as an expressway, the plan, the city's plan, MoDOT's plan, everybody's plan is to get traffic, to allow that through traffic to have the priority there. We need to get people in and out of those places as quickly as we can and as efficiently as we can and as safe as we can. Right now that operates at about 60 miles per hour in terms of, that's what the speed limit is. Cars probably travel somewhere between 60 and 65 miles per hour on average. Over 30,000 cars daily, and not just Republic residents, but an entire region using that expressway. It's a critical part. We call them arterial thoroughfares for a reason. They operate much like an artery does, and they are carrying people to the heart, which is, in our economy, the job centers, which most of the job centers, of course, in our MSA are located in the the southern portion of the city of Springfield along James River Freeway. So it's critical that we are able to get our residents, not just our residents, but residents from all of the communities west of here, to that interchange with James River as efficiently and as safely as possible. So to that end, we want to limit access, particularly direct access, to U.S. Highway 60. Eliminate the number of intersections, eliminate the number of driveway accesses, so that we can allow that through traffic to have the priority that it needs to get those 30,000 people and our 17,000 plus residents through there as efficiently as possible. So when I say that the transportation infrastructure is at present not sufficient, I'm really not counting U.S. Highway 60, because it's not going to, the idea is that U.S. Highway 60 would not directly serve this particular parcel. The idea is that Farm Road 103 would provide the direct transportation access to this particular parcel. And Farm Road 103 at present is an unimproved farm road that would not be capable of supporting a large volume of commercial development, certainly not the scale of 60 acres. So I want to make sure that the council is well aware of that issue. As properties along this corridor rezone to commercial districts, which staff thinks is appropriate, it will change some dynamics. You may see potential for intersection improvements, possibly signalization. All of those things have long-term impacts to this transportation corridor. It could ultimately lead to reduced speed limits, et cetera. So, the dynamic there will change over the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years. And this you could look at as sort of being the beginning of that. Where maybe 5 to 10 years from now, we have a signalized intersection on this corridor where people could go 60 miles an hour, 65 miles an hour. The speed limit could potentially be 50 or 45 or 40. So that transition begins with decisions like the ones we'll be making in this particular rezone case. So I don't want to just, sort of go over that particular issue lightly. Again, staff is still recommending approval. It's not uncommon that transportation improvements would lag behind the zoning. In fact, in Republic's experience, and I think in communities like Republic, it is often the case that the transportation improvements lag behind the zoning. So I don't want to paint the picture either that this is something, out of the ordinary, but I do want to make sure that I've covered that issue in detail with the council, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
Thank you, Mr. Tyson. Any discussion, questions from council, Mr. Jones?
What is the business that is right off the northeast corner of that parcel, that triangle shaped?
Carla.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, there's a car lot in that small triangle. That's actually in an unincorporated area, so it's not within our city limits, but it does have a couple of propane tanks for distribution and a used car lot.
Well, will the improvements, you said 103 will be serving it, looks like 164 would as well, correct? I mean, those two, that would be
The idea is that 164 would not serve it, at least long-term. The transportation plan, which I believe is illustrated on this map here, the next map, that's titled Future Land Use Map, you can see those lines. And again, these are just lines that are drawn, not arbitrarily, but not probably in the exact location that they will be when they're actually built. But you can see if Farm Road 103 would be, the idea is that it would be realigned to have a much better, safer 90-degree intersection, so you could get to that frontage road. 164 would most likely go away. And the idea then is, like I mentioned earlier, reduce the number of intersection access points to give priority to the through traffic.
Any other discussion or questions from council? Seeing none, remember this is a first read. If you have any questions before the next council meeting, please get with Mr. Tyson. Before moving on to the next one, that is bill number 18-31. I have two speakers on that bill. Do we have anyone who showed up late who did not get a card that would like to speak to this bill? The rezone. Do we have, I have two cards. Was there? Yeah, yes, sir. You come to the podium, state your name and address.
Hello, Council. My name is Tyler McConnell. My address is 3456 South Farm Road 101. I don't want to get too hung up on the traffic. We are very willing to work on the safety of it. We're actually working with BLP, who's across the street, to try and realign the whole intersection. Even though that part of it may not be in the city, we're trying to solve a problem that's even not technically a problem of the city's. We also have a right-on, right-off that we are working with MoDOT in the city to move approximately a few hundred feet east of where it's located now. That would give us about dead center entrance to the property. So I don't believe we're solely going to be collecting off of Farm Road 103. We're working on a realignment, like I said. I mean, I just don't want to get hung up on one particular part of this. When we're working on a 60-acre deal right now, there's 180 acres total. I think it'd be a great deal for the city with all the tax revenue, property taxes, jobs. I mean, so. But I just appreciate you guys' time, and I just want to say that we're willing to work. I know we have a lot of issues because this is a major project, but we are very willing to try to do with what we can with the city and with MoDOT and with county to try and make it a safe intersection for everybody. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you. Remember that is the first read, so if you have any questions, please get Mr. Tyson before the next council meeting, which will be 7 days from today. Did anyone not get a card about the next bill, which is 18-31, the rezone? Okay. What I'll do is, the way this will work, since this is not a public hearing, it is your opportunity to address the council. So I want to make sure that everybody understands when they come to speak against an item, that whoever it is, that we keep it orderly, and that those questions, it's not a question and answer because we had a public hearing. It's your opportunity to give your opinion on why you think it should or should not pass. So those comments should be directed to me, and then that gives the council an opportunity to hear that. So let this work. I'm going to open this up. We will have our first reading, if it passes council for a first read. We will have a staff presentation, and then I will call those that filled out a card. So I would ask that you gather your thoughts. I'll only call you to the podium once, and that'll be your opportunity to address the council regarding this issue. So at this time, I would ask for a motion and a second for the first reading of bill number 18-31.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Ms. Brenda?
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, approving amending the zoning code and official map by changing the classification of approximately 48.5 acres from agricultural AG to high-density, single-family residential R1H owned by Turner Residential Holding LLC and located at 7012 West Farm Road 170.
Thank you, ma'am. And I forgot to mention that, so after our staff presentation, we'll allow the citizens to come forward and speak. And then I'll ask you to come back to the podium, Mr. Tyson, for any questions that arise from that for council.
Sure.
So if you would please give us a brief overview.
Yes. The site subject to this particular rezone application is approximately 48.5 acres located along the 7,000 block of West Farm Road 170 in the City of Republic. The rezone to the R1H zoning district would permit single-family residential development at a density of approximately 6 dwelling units per acre, with minimum lot sizes being 7,000 square feet in size, minimum lot widths of 70 feet, and minimum lot depths of 90 feet. Of course, those are minimums. The lots can be larger than that, there are no maximums on any of those dimensions. The subject property currently enjoys immediate access to the city's water and sanitary sewer infrastructure. Both of those systems are of adequate capacity to serve high-density single-family residential development at this particular location. The site is presently served by West Farm Road 170, which is designated as a collector thoroughfare in the City of Republic in both the city and the county's transportation systems, meaning that it is intended to collect traffic from neighboring developments and neighborhoods, and then in essence funnel that traffic out to the arterial thoroughfare network that serves the city and the region. On the transportation system, recent counts along Farm Road 170 that were taken this past week showed daily traffic volumes between 600 to 800 vehicles per day, with volumes peaking in the PM hours. However, it is noteworthy that those counts were taken last week during a time when school is not in session. I think it is probable that traffic patterns would be significantly different if school were in session and we took those same counts, likely higher volumes and potentially an AM peak as opposed to the PM peak. Although we don't know that, this is the only data that we have available, so I want to make sure that that's clear. Farm Road 170 does have a pavement width of approximately 22 feet, affording at most points driving lanes approximately 11 feet wide. Traffic collected on Farm Road 170 is taken to the arterial network that serves our region at US Highway 60 to the west, and to Republic Road, also sometimes referred to as State Highway M, to the east. The city's adopted land use plan indicates that low-density residential development at densities between 1 and 6 dwelling units per acre is most appropriate in this general vicinity. The R1H zoning district would be compatible with what the land use plan is describing right there. The city's major thoroughfare plan includes a new north-south collector thoroughfare to intersect with Farm Road 170 that would be required to be built with development on this particular track, and that would be accomplished through the development and platting process itself. That particular collector thoroughfare would extend from Farm Road 170 and then go south to connect to Hines Street in the transportation plan. The public hearing held before the Planning and Zoning Commission this past week was very well attended, and there was quite a bit of testimony offered by members of the public. Both there were some in favor, and then most were in opposition. Noteworthy among some of that testimony were concerns relating to traffic along Farm Road 170. Those concerns relating both to volume and to speed. So not just one, but both. Traffic impacts at the intersection of Republic Road and Farm Road 170, which you can see there on the exhibits that you have included with your packet. There are 3 public street intersections in close proximity, and at some of those intersections, not all of the angles are very desirable from a traffic standpoint. All other concerns expressed include impact on local schools, impact on neighboring property values, and then there were also a couple of comments concerning stormwater runoff. I'm happy to answer questions or address any of those specifically, either now or when I return to the podium later. The P&Z Commission recommended approval of this particular application by a vote of 6-1. Their findings of facts, I believe, are also included with your packet, and staff is recommending approval of this application.
Thanks, sir. We have 2 citizens who would like to speak on this, and as we have 2, I would say ladies first. So Mrs. Johnson, if you would please come to the podium of 7058 West Farm Road 174 to speak in opposition. You'll have 5 minutes.
Just tell me when to stop. Our property connects to this piece of land. Out in our area, we are being drowned with high density. People purchase homes, lovely homes, west of this property, take pride in their community. It's medium density. Across the road on the north side are more beautiful homes, and I don't know this, but I would say they probably purchased land with their homes. And then right in the middle of this, you put another high density. I think it's time for you all to start considering what you're doing to the entire neighborhood out there, and ask for a medium density to be put in. There isn't anybody against the housing coming in. We know with that area it's going to develop with the school there. But consider those of us who are already there, who have put in time and work, years of work, trying to keep it a beautiful area for people to want to live in. And then we get more high density. Our road has been destroyed with high density. Our quality of life is not what it should be with high density. And to put this on another neighborhood, to add it on to ours, we already have some on the south side, and then we put it on the north side. I'd just like for you to consider that if that was your neighborhood, is that what you would want to do? The curve up there on Highway M, trying to pull out on that curve, is so dangerous, and we already have so much traffic cutting through there. And so I'm just asking that you consider the medium density, and we're not complaining about the quality of work that Mr. Turner does. I'm not familiar with it, but he did show us homes. The homes he showed us had a lot of green space around them. That makes a big difference in what it looks like compared to a high density. So that's all I'm here to say, is just consider the entire neighborhood, and let's stop putting so much on one neighborhood. That's all I'm asking of you tonight.
Thank you,
Thank
Mrs.
you.
Johnson. And next we have Mr., is it Rogels?
That's correct.
All right, of 6861 West Farm Road 170, here to speak in opposition of. You'll have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Must reiterate what Mrs. Johnson had said. I live on the north side, and my family chose to live there to have the space. We put 5 acres over there and to have a nice home, and wanted our property value to stay healthy. And my comments at last week's meeting were about why are we putting so many people so close together. I understand there's probably market trends for bigger homes on smaller plots, but when we're talking about balancing, revenue coming into Republic and dealing with the traffic and the water and the safety of this situation with the crazy corner there at M, and then additionally, those folks who paid for space are now going to deal with those who are they're going to be sitting on really small plots, and their neighbors are going to be real close together. I wanted less neighbors. I know that makes me a bad man, but I wanted less neighbors. That's why I bought 5 acres. So I assume that this might take a very long time, but over time, the market trend or the trends are the property value just go down when neighborhoods blossom like this into such a high density situation. So we're talking about safety. I live safety every day of my life as well, and that's going to have a lot of traffic for high schoolers who are learning how to drive, and especially with that intersection at M. I don't know how many accidents we have to have before that makes sense. So there's going to be 108 homes, 2 vehicles per home minimum, probably some teenagers in those homes, and hopefully it can split up a little bit between the south thoroughway and the north, but there's going to be accidents. We don't fix the traffic problem, in addition to all the high-density situations. I don't know what control group we look at, but this control group would like to keep it. We know we've got to develop. I understand that's a drive for the city, but I'd like to keep it less homes per acre.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Rogels. Mr. Tyson, come back to the podium, please, and discussion from council for Mr. Tyson. Questions, comments, or concerns? Mr. Jones?
Well, that is it's a bad intersection, and I don't think anybody's going to deny that. Today, it's a tough intersection at M Highway, and it's not just because of the angle; it's because of the elevation change of the road as well. So it's tough. So there would need to be a lot of consideration for what could be done there, if anything. I'd be interested to see what potential would be there for to do. So if you throw a lot more cars there, you throw a lot more potential.
without a doubt. I don't know that, from staff's perspective, that intersection needs to be improved. Likely that improvement is a reconfiguration of some kind, regardless of whether this development occurs or not. So it's certainly something that is an issue that needs to be looked at, needs to be addressed, and needs to be planned for, and then ultimately programmed with funding to address. We have done a little bit of preliminary research on accident statistics. The numbers struck me as low numbers, but then you also, of course, have to look at severity. If that's something the council desires us to look into further, we can certainly do that and have information for you at the next meeting to give you more details on that. But with regard to this particular development on this corridor, collectors, as we talked about before, are intended to carry larger volumes, and so that is probably the future of this corridor, and that intersection, like a lot of our intersections in this city, will require some improvement and probably some public investment.
Mr. Hand, I'm sorry, did I?
No, that's my concern. I drive that fairly often, and it's dangerous. I can't imagine having a teenager. I have a teenage driver. It's scary, and for him to take that every day would be pretty intimidating. So I would like to see what the accidents, like what those numbers look like.
Yeah. We can bring that in. I don't also want to paint a picture as though some sort of expensive improvement is the only solution at the same time. Although that is the ultimate solution, there's potentially some traffic calming types of applications we could look at and to try to address the issue.
Somewhat.
Traffic calming, things to slow people down, cause them to be more aware as they approach it.
Like what?
Well, development in and of itself tends to have a traffic calming effect. The more structures that are in your line of sight, the more driveways, people, it forces people to become more aware of how fast am I going, are there going to be other cars entering in front of me, so that in effect would have a traffic calming effect. There's a variety of other techniques that you can do with striping, certain median installations or facilities that you can install. Things that just catch people visually, if nothing else, to raise their awareness about how fast am I going and what threats do I face as I'm entering into this particular area. I'm certainly probably not the expert to talk about all of the different techniques, but there may be some we could apply here, and it would be worth looking into.
Any other discussion from council? Mr. Wilson? Sorry, Mr. Brashears, I'll get to you next.
Okay, in planning and zoning, the density was brought up. High density is 7,000 square foot, right?
Correct.
And what is medium density?
Minimum 9,000 square feet.
Okay, and it was brought up that approximately 40 houses, senior living would be in the high density, and then the rest of them would be right around 9,000 plus square foot. Is that right?
The developer submitted to the zoning commission an actual development plan that did, and it indicated that his plan, if he were to develop it, would be to have the higher density be along the Farm Road 170 frontage, and then he would serve the senior community from those units, and then the rest of it would be developed in at a density that would be more common to the R1M medium density subdivision. I think he passed around a preliminary layout that included 108 lots. So that was presented and made part of the record at that particular hearing by the developer, although I always add the caveat to that we're talking about a zoning and not a plat right now. So if upon a rezone, anybody who owns that property could develop it to its maximum potential. So the developer did, however, submit that plan, and that's what was on there.
I bring that up so the council would know what was said.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Oh, Mr. Brashears, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say I also agree with the intersection being quite a problem there. There's also Farm Road 101 comes into that area just right on that curve. and getting on M Highway from 170, if you're going east, itself can be a problem. But getting off of M Highway onto 170 is also a problem. If you're coming into Republic, you actually have to cross a lane to get on that road. The lane is on a curve, and it's so easy to turn in front of the car. So again, that how you could develop an intersection that could be more dangerous than that thing on a curve with 2 or 3 roads coming into it. It's ridiculous.
Any other discussion from council? Okay, seeing none, so I want to make sure that you have an understanding of what council is asking for the next meeting, information that they need to make their decision. So I think we have some traffic information that council is requesting, accident information for that intersection, is that correct? Is that what was asked for? And then also, I think there was a question Mr. Wilson raised about the appropriation possibly of those lots, how it was laid out to planning and zoning. Mr. Eisen has that, so he's going to send that to council so that everybody can look at that before the next meeting, before they make their decision at the second read and final passage portion. So is that accommodate all the requests from council to have the information needed to make a decision? Okay. Remember, this is the first read. If you have any questions beyond what we just covered, please get with Mr. Tyson in the meantime, and we will meet back here in 1 week to address for final passage. Thank you, folks, for coming in and speaking. We'll move on now to, I need a motion and a second for the first reading of bill number 18-32.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Ms. Brenda?
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, to establish a procedure for disclosing potential conflicts of interest and substantial interest for certain officials.
Thank you. Mr. Eisen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city currently has a conflict of interest and disclosure ordinance that is identical to the one that's being presented to you here today. The reason why you're seeing it again today is every 2 years we're required under state law to re-adopt the ordinance. This is the exact same ordinance that was re-adopted back in 2016 and asking to be re-adopted again today, dealing with financial disclosures. Under state law, they set minimum standards for disclosures and disclosures of interest, disclosures of financial interest, and disclosures in general. Basically, what this allows is us to set our own standards that are higher than what the state requires. This allows us to set a purpose. It also allows us to specify what is a interest, what the dollar amount is for that interest, and how it is to be disclosed. If council does not re-adopt it here at the next meeting or before the September 15th deadline, then basically we will fall back under the default statute for the state as far as the long form disclosures.
Okay. Any questions, discussion from council? Seeing none, remember this is a first read. If you have any questions before the next meeting, please get with Mr. Eisen. Moving on to other business resolutions. Resolution number 18-R-20, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, authorizing the city administrator to enter into an agreement with Midwest Public Risk for property and liability insurance for fiscal year 2018-2019. Need a motion and a second.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Ms. Parks.
Good evening. The city is currently using Midwest Public Risk, which is called MPR, throughout the rest of the discussion, for property and general liability insurance needs. The city does not have to go out to bid to use MPR since it's a state-authorized insurance pool. The invoice for the 2018-2019 renewal was received by the city and is due on June 30th. The invoice includes a rate increase of approximately $27,932. For the new amount to be paid is $218,275. The City of Republic, once staff started researching, found out that we've seen a 350% claim increase over the past 3 years. There are currently open claims that we have that could be discussed or answered in executive session due to sunshine laws. NPR has some added value to the city. On the legal side, that traditional insurance might not offer always. So at this time, I would like to introduce Mr. Kevin Parr. Some of you know him. He's the risk manager with NPR, and he's Republic's primary contact for the property and general liability insurance. He's just going to provide you a brief overview of our rates and how they arrived at them. Thank you.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Debbie mentioned, I'm Kevin Parr with Midwest Public Risk. I'm one of the risk managers. The NPR is a self-funded pool of over 200 members, both in Missouri and Kansas. So members like you choose, instead of buying insurance on the open market, you pool your funds with other public entities. And it's our job to serve units of local government, not only to provide the coverage when claims happen, but to do a lot of risk management up front. And some of that Debbie did explain. I'll be in next week to meet with the management leadership team to help put some AED paddles to the city's safety and liability efforts to get things kick-started again. And one of the things we're going to talk about with the department heads is all of the services that we have to offer. And most of those services are at no additional cost. Regarding what you have in front of you, the primary driver of the increase is one claim from 2016. It's the wrongful death suit. As you might imagine, we have that reserved for $800,000. Absent that claim, the city's claim history over the last 3 years is generally pretty good. The main driver of most of your claims are auto liability and auto physical damage. We won't pick on any one department here, but there are things we can do with not only that department but other departments to help with that. But again, absent that one claim, which I know we've been in mediation with.
We're familiar with that.
Absent that one claim, the city's doing a remarkable job, and we believe with the additional resources that NPR can bring to bear and the financial incentives that we have, that the clean year that we have this year, another clean year, that other claim drops off, and we'll see downward pressure on your costs going forward.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Any questions, comments, or concerns from council? Remember, speaking of any claims, we will not do outside of executive session. So if you have any questions about any claims, we can discuss those in executive for sunshine laws. Mr. Sullivan.
When it comes to municipalities, is this the severity or the frequency of claims? Have you seen any trends of up, down?
With the city, as I mentioned, there's just one severity.
But as far as municipalities in general, not just necessarily ours.
The trend we see in municipalities in general with ours are auto physical damage, damaging your own equipment, and auto liability. Essentially running into other people, and it tends to be with public safety in general, they're your biggest liability exposure. There's a lot they do on a regular basis with training. However, they're often in situations that are uncontrolled and by themselves.
Any other questions, comments, discussion from council? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Ms. Parks, did you have anything else to add to that?
Oh, I was just going to let you know that we will go out to bid next year once the claim is resolved, if council should desire. But at this time, staff is recommending that we go ahead and renew for this term.
As it is a resolution, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Moving on to resolution number 18-R-21, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, approving the audit report for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2017. Do I have a motion and a second?
Motion. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Ms. Parks.
The city charter states that the city financials will undergo an independent audit examination once a year. And the city started our preliminary audit the beginning of January, and we continue to work with the audit. And the audit team actually came on site in March. And at this time, I'm going to introduce John Cummings, CPA, CGMA, also a shareholder at KPM. Him and his team were the ones who conducted our yearly audit, and I'm going to turn it over to him for the audit presentation and any questions.
Thank you. Welcome, sir.
Good evening. Thank you all for having me here and giving me some time to speak. I know you have a full agenda, so I will keep this moving. If you do have any questions as I'm going through it, feel free to stop me. We're going to start on page 4 of the bound report. And this is the independent auditor's report that accompanies the financial statements. It's where we tell you how you did on your financials for the year. The year is the year that ended December 31st, 2017. And it opens with what we're reporting on, which is the financial statements. It discusses management's responsibility for the financial statements. The city is responsible for these financial statements. They are your statements. They're not my statements. My statements don't look as healthy as your statements. So more on that in just a minute. Auditors' responsibilities are discussed. Our responsibility is to perform an audit that we plan according to the risks that are present in the city. And we want to make sure that those financial statements are materially correct in all respects with the generally accepted accounting principles that we're auditing to. So with that, when you turn to page 5, you'll see another paragraph called opinions. And you can read through that thing. I can tell you it is a large accounting way of saying that you've received a clean opinion or an unmodified opinion. This means that your financial statements are materially correct and in compliance with the standards. So that is the same opinion as you received last year and the best possible results. So with that, I wanted to go over just a little bit of financial information. I know that the council receives a lot of financial information. This is the official information that's been audited. So on page 22, you'll find the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance for your governmental funds. I wanted to go over this just because it shows what came in, what went out, also goes over what you started the year with and what you're ending the year with. And I went through and did the courtesy of coming up with some variances compared to the prior year. If you take last year's audit report, you can do some math and get to that as well. For the general fund, total revenues were $6,265,791. That is up about $1,048,575 compared to last year. Now, there were some changes in structure compared to last year because motor fuel taxes were in the street fund last year. This year they're reported in the general fund. The reason for that is those funds are available for use for public safety to help fund the police departments. So those funds were shifted in the budget over to help offset those costs. And so with that in mind, your tax revenue was up $566,000 compared to last year at $5,215,062, and that was the major shifting item in your revenues. You also had sale of some assets under miscellaneous at $255,322, and total expenditures of $11,337,652. That's up about $5.6 million, and before you panic, $4.9 million of that relates to debt service refunding. So everything else was kind of shifted around compared to last year, again, with changing classifications of expenses. But to give you an idea, your big cost items were police and fire. And on police, you had $1,914,161. That's down about $219,000 compared to last year. But fire expenses were at $429,000 at $1,615,299. Those things are important because the city's investment in those particular expenses is large, and it also helps the citizens of the city with things like insurance rates and just generally being safe. So it's important to point that out. On the street fund, you had total revenues of $1,771,435. That's down about $152,000. Again, that was shifting the motor fuel tax revenue out. You had total expenses of $2,403,594. That is up about $564,000 compared to last year. The street expenditures were $2,205,907, which is up $570,000 compared to last year there, while the principal and interest payments were down about $6,000 for the year at $197,687. The Stormwater Improvement Fund had total revenues of $456,738. That's down about $149,000. The decreasing item there was taxes. Miscellaneous revenues were up about $3,000, while the taxes were down about $152,000. You had total expenses of $75,985. That's up about $40,000 compared to last year. Fire Sales Tax Fund had total revenues of $318,141. That's up about $18,000 compared to last year. Expenses were $1,173,330. The biggest item there, of course, is fire at $1,038,043. That's up about $997,000 compared to last year. You bought some rather large fire equipment. People may have seen it around. It's pretty cool stuff. You also had principal and interest on long-term debt of $135,287. That's up about $44,000 compared to last year. So in total, expenditures were up $1,040,641 in this fund. In Parks and Recreation Fund, you had total revenues of $3,077,768. That's up about $119,000 compared to last year. Your taxes were up $103,000 in that fund at $2,199,215. You had charges for services of $837,217 and miscellaneous revenue $41,336. Expenditures were $2,814,725, which is down about $20,000 compared to last year. $46,000 decrease in that fund came from decrease in principal and interest on long-term debt, which was $741,110, and you spent an additional $26,000, so the offset's a net down of $20,000. But Parks and Rec expenses were $2,073,615. I have to also say, and this is a personal note, your Parks and Recreation facilities here are amazing.
We agree.
I'm impressed. I like it. Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund. This is new for this year, and this is the result of shifting some sales tax revenue over, but it did have tax revenue of $187,715, and there were no expenses. So kind of encapsulate all of it. Total revenues in your governmental funds were $12,077,588, which is up about $1.1 million compared to last year. And total expenditures were $17,805,286, which is up about $6.7 million compared to last year. And again, a big chunk of that, $4.9 million, is debt service refunding and also expenditures for fire trucks. So kind of put it all in perspective there. If you turn the page, you'll see the rest of this statement. And I didn't really know a great way to get through it since it's on 2 pages, so we just covered everything on the 1 page. Now we can flip, see how everybody did in each fund. So the general fund, after those revenues and expenses, had a deficit of $5,071,861. There were other financing sources and uses that netted out to a financing source of $4,814,756, and that included $3.9 million in bond proceeds for that refunding. And so with that factored in, you decreased the general fund for the year by $257,105, ended the year at total fund balance of $3,725,105. In your street fund, there was a deficit of $632,159, lease proceeds to offset that of $660,779, and transfers, all for a net gain for the fund of $576,187. So you decreased for the year in this fund by $55,972 net of everything, and ended the year at $1,342,931. I've had my head down looking at numbers. I haven't looked up. Are there any questions? I'll just keep rolling until you holler at me. So, the Stormwater Improvement Fund had a gain out of revenues and expenditures of $380,753, transferred out $37,784, and increased net for the year by $342,969, which gave you a fund balance of $1,294,561. On the Fire Sales Tax Fund, there was a deficit of revenues and expenses of $855,189. Lease proceeds to offset that of $713,000. Transfers out $15,821 for a net of $697,179, which means you decrease for the year by $158,010, and you end the year at $231,467. On the Parks and Recreation Fund, you had an excess of revenues over expenditures of $263,043. You transferred out $231,264, and that left a gain for the year of $31,779, and an ending fund balance of $1,101,750. On the Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund, there was no other activity besides the tax revenue that was put in there for $187,715, and so that is also your ending balance. So overall, all of these funds increased the financial position of the city on the governmental fund side by $91,376. So we end the year with total fund balance on governmental funds of $7,883,529. Any questions on that? I know I went kind of fast, but I will say while everybody's digesting that, if you have any questions at all, this part has my cell phone number, my email, office phone. You guys are welcome to call, email, whatever. I'm available and can help out and answer any questions that pop up later. I know later you're going to be reading this at your home, and you're going to say, well, what about that number? Well, call me, email me, text me. I'm available. So, okay, that about does it for the governmental funds. Let's look at the utility fund of the city. That's on, I want to talk about page 27, and this is a similar statement to what we just looked at, except for it covers basically water and sewer services, and this will go a lot faster than the last one, so everybody can breathe a sigh of relief. Operating revenues for the city in this fund were $5,093,995. That's up about $95,000 compared to last year. In total, the city spent $1,337,732 on water services expenditures, and that is down about $436,000 compared to last year. The biggest item of change here was in wages and benefits, and there was a budget redistribution of those down into sewer services, which is why they're up about $400,000 at a total of $1,800,510. So when you take those totals that you expended for water and sewer, you get an operating expense total of $3,138,242, which is down about $35,000 compared to last year, and an operating income of $1,955,753. Now, I want to point out that decreasing operating expenses is pretty impressive in the present environment. I don't go very many places where I see utility costs being held down. So I would say that is a byproduct of sound budgeting and good management by your directors and people that are taking care of things. So I would say kudos to those folks. You had non-operating revenues and expenses that netted out to an expense of $7,310. That included interest income of $232,302, interest expense on long-term debt of $527,096. You had a gain on disposal of equipment of $2,111. Impact fees were $215,818, and rental income of $69,555 to get to that decrease of $7,310. Transferred out $512,175, and that left net income for the fund of $1,436,268, and an ending net position of $18,545,129. So overall, the utility fund had a pretty sound year. Any questions on financials? If there's not, that will conclude the auctioneer's part of the evening, and we'll talk about some recommendations. The first recommendation I wanted to discuss is on page 79, and it is a internal control item. It is a material weakness, and it relates to segregation of duties, specifically the lack thereof. And I went over this last year, and I will, while you're turning there, kind of go through it again. I don't want anyone to panic when you see this, because it's very common in municipalities this size and a lot bigger than this size. It's very difficult to segregate out the duties within the accounting area in such a way that we as auditors are satisfied. Access equals opportunity. And you have to have someone that has access to all areas for a review function. And you do have probably too few personnel, really. And so that's why this is in here. Now, you say, okay, well, what do we do about it? Well, there's really not a lot you can do about it without throwing resources, what I would consider to be, away. You have a lot of mitigating controls that are in place. There's a lot of different review functions, and there's more that are getting added. So what I would say is those mitigating controls become more important when you have a lack of segregation of duties. And the FBI guy that goes around and puts on all kinds of training about fraud and all this other says trust is not an internal control. So we can't rely on a trust factor, but we can rely on those mitigating controls, and that's the processes and procedures that the city's putting in place. And you recently went through a pretty solid turnover in personnel, and those people now are getting settled into the job. And so as that happens, I think more mitigating controls can be added, more processes, more procedures, more reviews, and that'll help limit the city's exposure on this segregation of duties thing. Does that all kind of make sense? So in summary, what I would say is keep doing what you're doing, heading in that direction, and use the resources as well as you can. Take those mitigating controls seriously. So with that, that's it for the bound booklet. There is a separate letter that has item 1, electronic information safeguards, down at the bottom, and while you're finding that one, I will tell you that the other letter is called the governance letter, and it's the auditor letter to those charged with governance. And so we have to tell you certain things about the audit process according to our standards, and all of that information is in there. What it's really getting at is what kind of journal entries did we make, and were there any disagreements with management. And I'll spoil it for you. Management was very, very open to all of our recommendations, and very agreeable to work with. So there's not going to be any earth-shattering news in that letter for you. On the other letter that has recommendations from us to you, they're more operational type recommendations, maybe don't fall into internal control area so much. The first one here is electronic information safeguards, and I know we're pressed for time tonight, so what I'll tell you is that cybersecurity needs to be taken very seriously. You have a lot of personally identifiable information on site. That makes you a target. Now, I'm not an IT guy, I'm an accountant. So my experience is pretty much limited to that and what I've seen out auditing and the horror stories I have heard. And so what I can tell you is that criminals are very creative, and they're really probably ahead of law enforcement and prevention. And so if something seems off, doesn't seem quite right, we do encourage people to have that thought in the back of their mind, this probably isn't right, it's worth verification. I probably told this story last year, but I have a close friend that is a finance director at a nonprofit, and his assistant got a email from the exec director that said, hey, I need you to wire transfer this amount of money for this deal I'm working on. We got to finalize it today. It has to be there today, or we can't do this. And I need $15,000, which is a substantial amount of money. And so the guy did what he was supposed to do. He jumped through the hoops, used the email as one of the authorizations, got through the process, got it done. Exec director walks in later that day. The guy says, hey, you got your money. You happy? I did good. The guy says, what money? I didn't ask for any money. Turned out, it was basically a spoofed email, and the money was just gone. So they knew enough from paying attention to know where the exec director was going to be. They knew who in the process to contact to initiate the transaction. That means they had to have been camped out watching operations. And if you think that just would happen there and not here, I would say that you're probably fooling yourself. So it's very important to take information that's electronic and controls over that very seriously. Item 2 is periodic internal control review. As I said earlier, there were a lot of new people in new positions, and that's all well and good, and you have good people, but that is a lot to take on and learn in a moment. And so this is in here. We know last year we recommended the same thing. You'll notice here we say we commend. We commend the city for taking the steps to look at policies and start changing things. We want to continue to recommend that you continue that process. And so as people get more settled in, identify areas where extra reviews can happen, extra controls. Whenever those are possible, I think the more established a person gets in their job, the more comfortable they get with the process, the more they can recognize areas for improvement. And so we want to encourage the city staff to continue that process. The next item is communication of ethical practices, and I won't again read through the whole thing, but it's important to have this in mind at all times as a city. Sometimes people can get complacent, forget that they're kind of on a pedestal in the community. If something goes wrong, it's a black eye, not just for them, but for the city. And so things like those controls that are in place, holding yourself to a higher standard becomes very important as representatives of the City of Republic. And so we recommend that, on a regular basis, and I think you do this, it's on your walls, it's important to be ethical, to remember that people are looking, and take all of this very seriously. You are the safeguard. And so talking about that in meetings with staff is an important part of it. The next page is cross-training of personnel. I think this kind of goes without saying, but it guards against unforeseen circumstances and prepares the city for employee changes. We'll take the positive side of it, and let's say that somebody in a key position wins the lottery and decides, hey, I don't have to work anymore. If they're the only person that knows how to do payroll, well, you guys are going to be upset on payday because there's not going to be anybody there to do payroll. Somebody else needs to be the backup to virtually every function in accounting. And since you have a limited number of personnel, we talked about earlier, that involves cross-training. You can't have a backup at each position that's just a dedicated backup. So cross-training is important. It also provides a measure of internal control by providing someone else that could come in and do the job. If you're familiar with banking operations, banks require people to take vacations, and somebody goes in and does somebody's job. An important thing about fraud is that if a fraud is going on, it generally has to be maintained. Somebody has to be there to keep it going. And if they have to be gone, then somebody else doing the job would likely catch them. So cross-training is important. Item 5 is we recommend that the city designate a federal grants administrator. At the moment, there's really not a single point where all the grant information in the city flows to. It's important to know that the different grant requirements are being met. I don't know if anyone has read 2 CFR, the new uniform guidance that was put out by the Fed. Anyone? Basically, it ties into all your grant agreements that come with federal funds now, and it is a lot more complicated and a lot more stringent, go figure, than it used to be. The federal government got a little taste of accountability, so to speak, with the ARA funds that went out, and they haven't let up. And so the penalties for messing up could be recalling those funds, having to pay back grant funds. And if you've already spent them on a project, that could be a pretty big problem. So having a single person that is designated in the city to ensure compliance with these federal grants and tracking the federal grants that the city has in motion at any moment is an important thing. And so we do recommend that you determine who would be best for that. I can't make that choice for you, and designate that person to have that responsibility. Item 6 is backup of financial records, and this is specifically about a summit issue that occurred during the year. If you've been around, you've probably heard that there's some summit issues. Those are presently being resolved for the audience. There's going to be a new accounting software that's going live very soon, and will resolve this particular issue, and I think streamline the accounting process quite a bit and lead to some efficiencies and better reporting. But with that said, it's still important to do backups of that accounting system, and those were happening, but they weren't tested, and the backup was corrupt as well, so it was kind of a mess and had to be rebuilt. Would recommend that periodically, in addition to making the backup get tested, not in a live action scenario. On the next page, bank reconciliations. Again, this is kind of a summit issue. The way that particular software works, there's no clear tie-in between their module for the bank reconciliation and the ledger, which is kind of critical since that's what you're trying to actually put together. And basically, there needed to be one more step in the process to have something that clearly pulled that together. And so we recommended that kind of a cover sheet get done that pulls that information from both reports together and shows that they do in fact match. And that's already been done, so next year you'll see we commend you for doing this. But this year it's a recommend, and technically it's already done, so it might be a dead issue at this point. Item 8 is utility billing adjustments. And during the audit we noted that the city has utility billing adjustments that are approved by a member of management, but it doesn't the city doesn't require that the billing adjustments be approved by city council. We think that's probably a good control to have those adjustments at least provided to city council for review. You may not have to approve them, but have them available. This creates basically an extra layer of security. Somebody couldn't just adjust off a family member's account and no one else would see it necessarily. If you run that adjustment report, it's going to show all adjustments. So, and if somebody's looking, you pretty much taken away opportunity, which is critical. Next item is bank depository agreements, and we recommend that as a custodian of public monies, you should take a look at certain elements of your depository agreements if you haven't, and you want to determine that the depository agreement covers what the bank is going to agree to look at when it comes to checks. You can have 15 signatures on a check, but if the depository agreement says we're only looking at one, it don't matter how many signatures you have on the check. So you want to be sure that that depository agreement has them doing what your policy says you want done. And then you should also look to see who can do wire transfers and make sure that conforms with city policies, and then also who is able to open new bank accounts in the city's tax ID number. You'd be surprised how many times we send out our bank confirmations. Part of our process, you're not required to do bank confirmations. We do them because it's good practice. We always put on there that we ask that the bank basically confirm any other accounts that are in the tax ID number. You'd be surprised how many of them come back with additional accounts that the city doesn't really know about because somebody went out and opened one up and the bank said, oh, you're with the city, and that just happens. So bank depository agreement should outline who can do that. Item 10 is approved vendor list, and we recommend that the city add a policy and procedure to have an approved vendor list for purchases made by the city. This allows the city to vet vendors prior to using them. That makes sure that they're legitimate. There's a fraud scheme out there basically that people just send out in mass fake invoices to governments. And if they do that, they're usually using a name of a company that's similar to something that would be a normal vendor for you. Having an approved vendor and master vendor file in your system would basically kick a flag that, hey, this address information changed for this vendor, what happened? And if it didn't flag, you'd just be sending a check to your vendor, and they're going to say, hey, you sent us some money you shouldn't have, and you'll get your money back. If you send it to the person behind the fraud, you're not getting your money back. So the approved vendor list is an important thing to have. And last but certainly not least, there's a couple of new pronouncements that are going to affect the city. GASB Statement 83, certain asset retirement obligations. Basically, this is dealing with decommissioning electric poles, sewage treatment plants, fuel storage tanks, that sort of thing. Large items. I have a case right now where a flood has affected a wastewater treatment plant in the city multiple times. There's a large project that is going to basically move that facility to another location. But part of the grant is that the city has to put the existing old facility back to farmland. Well, that's going to cost some money. So under this standard, that's going to have to be reported as a liability to the city. So that's pretty much in a nutshell the change there. The bigger one is on leases with GASB 87. GASB 83 is for your 2019 fiscal year. GASB 87 is for your 2020 fiscal year. It deals with leases right now. For those of you that don't know, there's two kinds of leases. There's a capital lease and an operating lease. Capital lease is you intend to keep the item. Operating lease is just that, it's rental. You plan to use the item for a certain amount of time, and then you turn it back into somebody. Copiers, pretty common. Right now, you only record capital leases. And you don't record anything on operating leases as a liability to the city. You don't disclose them as a commitment, and that's the end of it. Under this new standard, you will be booking the operating leases as well. There won't be such a thing as an operating lease from an accounting perspective. So that's pretty much all there is. I know that was a lot, but hopefully I got through it pretty quick for you, and hopefully it made sense. Any questions on any of that?
Any questions or discussion from council? Seeing none, let me bit a little bit, so let me go back and read that resolution.
Sorry.
It's okay. Resolution number 18-R-21, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, approving the audit report for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2017. I already have the motion and the second. We've got the presentation. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Thank you, sir. Moving on to resolution number 18-R-22, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, authorizing an architect services agreement with Gaskin Hill Norcross of Missouri, Inc. for a new animal control shelter and interior renovations to City Hall. We have a motion and a second.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Nelson.
Good evening. If you recall, a while back we sent out a request for qualifications, or an RFP, so to speak, for architectural services for City Hall renovations and our new animal shelter. We had I think it was 7 respondents. Staff evaluated all those proposals. We scored them resoundingly. GHN, I don't recall the actual name, but GHN was the clear favorite. We approached them and asked them for a scope and fee for these services. For the City Hall renovations, they proposed $6,000, and for the animal shelter, it was $30,000.
Any questions, comments, or discussion from council?
I saw a sketch for the City Hall. Do we have a sketch for the shelter?
We do not. The sketch for City Hall was actually prepared by Debbie and was it Roger? Roger Day with Better Projects, and that's something we provided to GHN as a model of what we were looking for. And to that end, that will expedite that process. We expect them to turn that around rather quickly, and hopefully, we're estimating around August, send this out for bid to get the City Hall renovations started.
It's important to note too that the City Hall renovation does a number of things. It makes the workflow easier. It allows better ADA access, and it provides for better safety and security for our staff that works here every day. So it's not just about we wanted to renovate it to make it look better. There were a number of reasons that it needed to be done.
Yes.
Any other questions, comments, or discussion from council? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Nelson. We have a finance report. We just had a finance report. Ms. Parks for the finance report.
Yes, and I will try to keep this part brief. Most of you have this packet at your thing, and I will put it on the website for the public to see. Our sales tax revenue, which you have probably seen from our Facebook page, is at 6.25% this year over last year. This to us indicates that the up and downs that we were having last year, those issues, where our sales tax revenue seems to be leveling out. So that indicates to me that the reporting issues we were having from the Department of Revenue seem to have fixed themselves. I would like to, at this time, thank Mike Landis for the wonderful graphic that will now be out on the website to demonstrate to the public the sales tax revenue sources. Overall, this cash of the city is $11,084,147,000. The unrestricted cash is $2,286,171.99 at this moment. That's in the general fund. As you'll realize, that is a healthy unrestricted fund balance, but as we go through the year, we'll draw that down a little bit. That can be found on the cash report here in your packet. The financials we have prepared for the end of May. I have put them in that Excel spreadsheet so that you don't have the summit reports. And I've included a summary sheet in the beginning of the financial section. Basically, it's the same format that the budget's in, and it basically shows the revenue to date and the expenditures to date. You'll notice that the water and the wastewater, approximately, the water fund is at this moment negative for the year, but talking to the water department today, I got some insight on the ebb and flow of the water revenues. We increase as the summer goes on, and we peak in September. So when you look at where we are today, it doesn't indicate where we'll end at the end of the year. It just shows you this snapshot in time, our fund balances, where the revenues have come in, and then the expenditures. As you can see that the general fund, the revenue total that came in so far this year is $3,557,000. And the expenditures to date are $2,925,438. All this really tells us is that some of our bigger projects have not been paid for yet, such as our consulting fees that will be coming out over the next couple months for these larger projects you approved earlier in the year. So you guys can review this. If you have any questions over our financials, you could, you know where my office is, and I'm always open to talk to anybody at any time. I would just let you guys know that in the second council of July, we will be having the mid-year budget amendment. This was something that we started last year. It will capture a lot of those items that you guys have approved to date, but just were not included in a budget amendment at that time. And then also, I just like to let you know that we have finished a complete revamp of our chart of accounts, going along with the new Tyler system. So when that budget amendment comes to you, you'll see the old account number and the new account number, and you'll also see that we're consolidating some of those accounts at that time. So it'll look a little different, but we'll have a little bit of an education piece with the agenda to go with it. We are also working on, with city administration and the legal department, a revenue book. This will give us definitions of all our revenue sources and hopefully be able to allow this city in our budget projections to trend our data a little bit better and really know what all our revenue sources are. And if there is ever change in management or in the the finance department, that knowledge won't disappear. It'll be there in that book, and it'll probably be added to your guidebooks once this is approved. Also, I just wanted to let you know that sadly, there probably will not be a financial report in August. The reason for that is we'll be running two systems, Summit and Tyler, and we'll have to make sure they both match, and our staff will be a little busy, so I apologize in advance, but you'll have hopefully a really good financial report in September. Tyler is progressing very rapidly. All of the finance staff is going full speed, and we go live on July 20th on the financial section and the general ledger. We're also moving up the date for cash receipting, so that is to coincide with EnerGov. They start their consultant presence on July 9th, and so there's going to be a lot of rapid changes once mid-July happens. The last thing I wanted to do is talk about, I'm required to fill out on your behalf a report called the Emma report, and so we have the completed audit today, so we've already been working on that, and it will be filed by the June 30th deadline, and it's really the continuing disclosure annual report, and it's filed to the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board. It's for our bonds that we have. Also, we will submit the semi-annual financial report. This is required by state statute to be completed every 6 months, and that will go into the July newspaper. I'll run it in the News Leader and the Commonwealth for all the citizens to see. And we are also kicking off the 2019 budget and 5-year CIP program. We're going to have a kickoff meeting with supervisors and managers on July 13th, and we will be getting, working for the rest of the year on the budget in that process, and we'll keep council informed as we go. And then last, I would just like to say I really appreciate council and management for allowing us to do the weekly city huddle. Our staff has enjoyed it immensely, but I just wanted to give a case in point of how it was super effective this week. One of our staff members had an unfortunate event in the middle of the Tyler implementation. It was a bad time. I mentioned this at the huddle. Within an hour, I had an email from another department who had volunteered their staff time, and they were able to help me, so I wanted to give out a shout out to the police department. They're shorthanded enough as it is, but Kathy James volunteered, completed a whole database for our Tyler implementation. That demonstrates teamwork as a city, our values, and thank you for allowing us to do the huddle. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, discussion, comments from council regarding the financial report? Seeing none, I have a motion and a second to approve the financial report.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Thank you, Ms. Parks. Moving on to report from staff, Mr. Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just real briefly, I want to touch upon the audit. I think that is a very, very thorough report, and it's a very good one. And I think it is those that would be new, this is a new auditor that we've utilized. This is our second year. I think the reporting of it is excellent. One thing about it, I wish John was here because I want to commend him for the work that he does. He spends a lot of time in here, Debbie, to your staff, and all the work and all the interviews that we do with the auditor to go through this. One thing I asked John when we sit down, he'll always ask me, is there anything you want? I said, I want a full review of anything and everything that we could do. And some of these recommendations that are in there are reoccurring because I say I never want them to get out. So they may be in there for as long as you see me. It's like I want them in there for our staff to know that we are going to constantly talk about fraud. We're going to talk about processes that we have to maintain, but also the staffing level. We made adjustments in the staffing level last year by bringing another person on full time. So that we're going to constantly keep working on a delineation of duties where Debbie is not the sole purpose that can look at it. And I think that's just for safety for her and for the organization as well. So there's someone that's not in control of that all. But that's part of the process in the budget we're going to continue to work with. I think the other piece about it is getting separation of duties that's outlined in there is one of the things I'll be bringing to council. One of the admin policies I'll be drafting, at least for the leadership team especially, is to create a separation of duties time when there is a cross-training process that takes place. It allows them to get away, disconnect from the city as well, but also allows us to look in cross-training and those things. To be clear about something, on payroll, we have redundancy. So there's a number of people that are like, well, we got plenty of people that can do payroll. So there is cross-training, but it's a process that we need to continuously work on. But I appreciate the aspect that we do remind our staff about fraud. We do remind our staff about our purchasing policy. I'm pretty proud of the fact that when you consider those that were here when we found that those water meters that we had to stop, hold off on payment, bring it to the council. I think that it speaks to the internal controls we have, that we bring that out fully transparent of the situation that was involved, as well as all the other financials. So I do believe we're on a very solid footing. I think the financials represent that, what he presented tonight from our financial position. We still got work to do. We'll discuss that in the budget process. Jared and I and Mr. Landis met with the Census Bureau. Believe it or not, we're gearing up for the 2020 census. And just to prepare, There will be, one of the things that they're doing, it's outlined in the admin report, one of the things they are doing this year is they're engaging more partnerships with the communities, which essentially has where the mayor will appoint a committee and a designee, most likely myself, that will be the representative on behalf of the city that will work with it. He'll commission a team of local leaders that will sit down and make sure that we get the message out, messaging to the community, making sure that we're capturing all the areas that they've got data now that will tell you what areas of the community are least likely to complete the census data, how to get more information to those areas. So by the beginning of 2019, we'll most likely have that commission at least established, or at least an ordinance provided, because we will establish it by ordinance. That's one of the things they've asked us to do, is establish that by ordinance, and we'll have that by early 2019 and start having meetings in the middle of 19 in preparation for that April date in 2020, whenever they will do, they call it Census Day. So we have plenty of time. They've got coaching and things that they want us to walk us through. Welcome Tanya Hammonds in the back, our new chamber director. We had a great meeting with her this week in relationship to how to partner between the city. I think everyone would agree. And one thing that is critical to the growth and momentum that we're seeing in the community is having a strong collaboration and a strong chamber presence, but also a collaboration with the city, the school, and the chamber as we continue to navigate and grow. I think one of the pieces that's very telling when we're dealing with economic development or people that are coming in, it'd be very helpful to have another presence. It's helping kind of on that customer relations, business retention and expansion piece. And I believe that Tanya has the energy and the excitement and the background to help us and help our community to continue in the momentum we're seeing. So Tanya, welcome. Great to have you. A great conversation yesterday, so thank you. Garrett, thank you for your participation and investment on the executive board. Savings on Hines and Oakwood. One thing about it is I loved in that audit report where they talked about the amount of money we've saved in the water wastewater. I think we're constantly looking for saving money, but at the same time when you do that, they bring up that we're short on staff. I think that there's a fine line that we're going to have to continuously watch, but there's a part in the Hines and Oakwood project that I want to commend Andrew for, and Garrett, our new EIT that was brought on, some of the changes we've made in the alignment and the staffing that we have in different departments. But if you'll see down there, there's $126,000 in STP funds, another $31,000 in local funds to the city that is being established with the changes we've made in personnel and the expertise that they're bringing. So I commend Andrew for severing that. I don't want to use the word severing the contract, but that's what it says. We are severing that with Olson, not to say that Olson did something wrong, but the amount of money that was there was about $165,000. So Andrew met with them and found a way to save the community at least $31,000 in that local funds. And I look forward to having this discussion that you understand what Oakwood and Hines does to our funding until 2022. So we are doing that project, but the city does not have necessarily street funding from those STP funds because they're designated to that until 2022. So to find that additional $126,000 could add money into the future of things that we could do. So I appreciate that savings. Real quickly, Well 5 has had some pump problems, and before we're going to be making some emergency expenditures that are being repaired. That's looking to be in the $20,000 to $25,000 range. But at least I believe it was 30 years. That pump has served its useful life. So I think it's done a pretty good job for us. In relationship to the 60 corridor, where we're talking about the traffic and not necessarily the Tyler and his development. One thing that we would like to do, and I think this helps generate the discussion, I would like for us to have a work session about the future of that corridor, of how we got to work to make sure that we're all on the same page and work on what those issues are. I'd like to convene with planning and zoning, city council, MoDOT, OTO, and have Garrett kind of lead that discussion for how do we protect that corridor long term before we have traffic lights all through that section. Because I do not see additional funding coming in any time soon. I mean, they're talking about a fuel tax on the ballot, and our first need right now is 174 and 60. So if we start adding additional stops and slowing down traffic in between there, it's not just necessarily Tyler's development or what the McConnells are looking to do with their property. It's how do we protect and work together collectively so that we're not slowing down the traffic in that, but we're still reaching economic development opportunities, because I think they've got a great idea for their development. It's just, we got to make sure that we're not making development decisions that affect 30,000 people and forgetting that in that process. And I think that there's a time for us to all get together and have just a discussion is, what does that need to look like in the decisions we're making that affect that corridor? Because I think you see some other cities that'll make that decision, and it slows down a lot of the traffic, and it really stunts the growth and the ability to move traffic in and out of their community. So I think that all the decisions we're making, both the city, MoDOT, and OTO, who is our regional authority, is important that we're all discussing what that looks like, so that we can tell the development community what that needs to be as we move forward in the future. But I appreciate the dialogue tonight, and so all the conversation. I will let you know that I'm going to do something probably I haven't done in the first couple of years I've been here. I'm going to completely unplug from the city starting Friday at 5 probably, but I won't be out until starting Monday through July 5th. So Jared's going to be at the helm, and if you have something you need in the office, contact Lisa or Jared. But if you don't see a return text or something, it's not because I'm ignoring you, it's because my wife has control of the phone. And so, but I appreciate the time away. I appreciate the staff allowing me the time away, and that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Well, I appreciate that we have a staff that's capable, that you can take that time off without having to worry. Is Mr. Squibb? Yes, he's here. I want to thank Mr. Ryan Squibb for the Commonwealth, allowing, I had the opportunity to write a short little piece for the Commonwealth, and I assume that that's going to rotate around different mayors throughout Greene County. But that gives us another opportunity to reach out to the citizens and say, give them an idea of what's going on in the city outside of just what they see at a council meeting. Also, Steve Largent at KICK, I'm on there every other Monday in the morning, and he gives us an opportunity there to talk about what's going on in the city, and that kind of builds that excitement and helps with what we're doing. And I think in the future, as that census committee is going to be so important, because it's important to us in the city to get the most accurate count that we can. It's not just because we want to see an inflated number or a bigger number. There are a multitude of reasons that it's important for us to have a proper census count. So that committee will be vitally important with those people that are going to help us figure out ways to make sure that it happens. And then again, with Mr. Squibb in the Commonwealth, having that access to write an article, that's somewhere we can plug to help people get out for the census or to be counted. The finances, it's great that we have that independent audit. I know it's a lot of information, and it takes a lot of time to get that information out, but it's really good for our citizens to see just how open we are. I think we all expected that there were going to be some changes because of that debt service, but if we're going to be spending that money, what better way to spend it on getting rid of, I say bad debt, but long-term debt obligations that strangle the city in the future. So while that was a scary number, the city's still healthy financially. We're just taking resources that we can and putting those toward paying debt off. The planning and zoning applications, we had Mike Landis, Brenda Jackson, thank you guys. Mike pushed it on Facebook, and we had 7 applicants in the past. From what I'm told, it was hard to get people to step up and want to serve the city, especially on a volunteer basis, and to have 7 people in the community come forward and want to serve. I commend all of those people for doing that. I commend the people who have served on planning and zoning, and those folks get to help shape the future of the city and spearhead those items. So the last thing I would say is that we had a citizen or a business owner come in and talk about an ad hoc business committee. And while that is not, out of the question, I think it's only fair that we give the chamber an opportunity to see how we can collaboratively work on those things together. I don't know that an ad hoc committee is needed. I think maybe more people need to get involved in the Chamber of Commerce, because that's where we would be sending people, those people in business, to get information and to communicate with the city. So I thank Brandon for bringing that up last time, Mr. Self, about the chamber, because that's where it's probably important. So I'm going to move on to council reports, and I'm going to do something I haven't done yet, and I'm going to start in the middle here, Mr. Ann.
I don't like going out of order. Like, that's part of the whole Baker thing.
We'll get back around to
all got to be in order, people. Great job on the finances. I enjoy looking at the audit report and all of the financials of the city. Paying off that debt service coverage. I mean, that debt service is awesome. That's exactly the path we need to take and keep rolling down. I enjoyed the conversation about M Highway and that corridor. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing what all of those numbers look like. So, other than that.
I'll go this way, I'm
Go,
sorry.
that's all right.
Mr. Franklin.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate everything we're hearing in the audit. It sounds like there's been a lot of hard work that's been done, and it's very appreciated. It's great to hear a lot of good feedback, and it's also great to hear continued improvement. That's always something very important. One thing I wanted to share was last week, Councilmember Russell and I had the opportunity to go attend the Missouri Municipal League Elected Officials Training Conference, and that was a great help to me. A lot of information between ethics, personal law, sunshine law, about everything we really need to know. It kind of just gave me a lot of information, a lot of different resources to help me help Republic. But had a great time. There was a lot of different people, even from the stuff we learned from that, just the contacts I made. There was contacts from Harrisonville, Belton, Poplar Bluff. We had some people from Battlefield, Springfield. I mean, the amount of people that I had contact with, it was all over the state. And so it was a very great experience. Also had a great conversation with Cliff Cate Thursday night after he had a meeting here with staff at City of Republic, and he had nothing but great things to say about everybody. And so, 180 miles from home, I'm hearing great things about the City of Republic. And that's pretty awesome. But I really appreciate all your hard work. I appreciate being able to hear those great things about your work. But that's pretty much all I had.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Self?
I too want to welcome Tanya, so thank you for coming tonight. And then also the two that spoke earlier, Mrs. Johnson and then the gentleman
Mr. Robles.
Mr. Robles that came up and spoke. It's always nice to have participation, so appreciate their opinions. And then also I want to thank Andrew there. There's been a lot of work up and down Oakwood, and so it's been a little challenging to say the least here and there. But I know that it's all coming to a good end, so I appreciate the urgency on that. So, and then also Police Department for extending that arm to our Finance Department and showing teamwork. That is one of the highlights, I would say, of tonight for doing that. That's awesome for the better good, so thank you all.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Wilson?
I'll kind of echo everybody else. It's been a great year so far. That's pretty much it.
Can get better. Mr. Jones?
As I say, it's good to see that Republic has made the list for top 10 fastest growing cities in the state for the first time, maybe? Is that the first time that Republic's been on the list? Right. First that I know of. So that's pretty big deal. Also, it's been interesting. I've had several inquiries about Have a Blast from people that don't live in Republic, from the surrounding area, Springfield, Willard, Buffalo, all around. So it's going to be bigger this year, I think, than ever, and a lot of work goes into that, so looking forward to it.
You can attest the amount of work that goes into that, right?
You guys started planning more than a month ago, right?
Mr. Beshears?
It's real hard to make an audit report, interesting. But at the same time, Gary and others have been on the council for years. It's good to see one that's this thorough. We've had different reports in the past that probably were good reports, but we didn't have really the thoroughness and the explanation that it was with it like it was tonight. And this would not have happened without Debbie and company. It's unbelievable how much it takes for the auditors to come in, to have stuff right, for them to go through and come up with a report like this. So, thank you, Debbie.
Mr. Dyke?
Well, of course, as I've said in the past, we have one of the best staff you could ever ask for. And knowing what Debbie and her team has had to go through to get a financial report like this and have it go through the audit and come out as good as it did with the complications and problems that they've had to deal with Summit, the accounting software is just amazing to me how they can have numbers even look halfway decent, and accurate, because I know in talking with her and some of her other staff, it's a daily challenge for them to know, is this right or wrong, and finding out if it is, and if it isn't, finding out why and correct it. So really appreciate it, and I think it's something great that not only the employees of the city with Summit and what it's gonna offer to, Tyler, in the future, but access that the public's going to have to look at, their utility bills and access to the city people, I think it's just gonna be something people are gonna wonder, how'd we live without it? Thank you.
I'm not gonna lie to you, I got a little nauseous when you said something.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Dyke. And Mr. Russell.
When you're at the end, you feel like just reporting what you had for lunch or something.
What was it?
I had salad and a sandwich. It was nothing special.
No. So two things. The debt service, when I saw that, it was a no-brainer. Like, it just didn't, I was like, awesome. I didn't know that was going to be there, but when I saw that, that's exactly the way it should be. I'm glad to see that. Number two, we did get to go up to the Missouri Municipal League. I learned a lot, but I learned a lot more from talking to other people, hearing about their staffs and how they aren't nearly as good. Their city councils where they fight, and some still smoke in the city council area. Anyway, the drama and the infighting, and I'm just sitting there going, well, either I'm really dumb or we don't have this problem. So I'm pleased to report that we don't seem to have the same dysfunctions as some of the other places. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, we are certainly blessed. Well, I know the night was long, so let me extend it just a little bit by asking to go into executive session. No further action other than announcing adjournment by the mayor shall take place after an executive session that is scheduled as the last matter on the agenda unless otherwise stated on the agenda or as allowed per RSMO 610.02. We will be covering RSMO 610.021.1 pending and or potential litigation, closed session, closed vote, closed record, as well as RSMO 610.021.3, hiring, firing, promoting, or disciplining personnel, closed session, closed vote, closed record. Do I have a motion and a second to go into executive session?
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Councilmember Self?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones? Councilmember Brashears?
Aye.
Councilmember Dykeman?
Aye.
Councilmember Russell?
Aye.
Councilmember Duran?
Aye.
Councilmember Franklin?
Aye.
Motion carries 8-0. This will end our regular session. After a 5-minute recess, we'll reconvene for executive session. Thank you.